Mr. Anderson Podcast.
My podcast show, Mr. Anderson Podcast, on all platforms: Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeart. Tap me in, listen to me, get at me. Mr. Anderson TV News. Mr. Anderson CEO313 on Instagram. I design coats, jackets. Just the jacket you see right here. I do body oils, air fresh, homemade candles, and I'm
AI jackets out now.
top 5 Detroit rappers all time.
Blade Icewood.
Blade Icewood is king of Detroit, man, the ruler of the Great Lakes.
Y'all know what y'all watching, man. We watching the making of the Blade video. You know what I'm saying? Blade Icewood.
So I my, but when I run up with the freestyle shit, I got soldiers who eat.
Hey.
Then if you get past them, then you can holler.
And she screaming at the top of her lungs, she crying. She like, Blade just got killed, Blade just got killed.
Icewood, 27, whose legal name was Darnell Lindsay, was in a wheelchair inside his Range Rover on Tuesday night when a shooter pulled alongside in a vehicle and fired.
Darnell Lindsay, better known as Blade Icewood, wasn't just a Detroit rap legend. He was a West Side pioneer, a drug dealer, and a founder of a highly respected rap crew, the Street Lords.
Sitting here with my man Blade representing the Street Lords. You still represent the Street Lords, right?
Yeah, you know, street lord for life.
It's only one Blade. I don't want to be Blade. It will never be another Blade. He a legend.
But his street reputation put a permanent target on his back. In 2004, 7 rounds from an AK-47 left him paralyzed.
Fewer than 24 hours later, Blade Icewood was shot inside his Oak Park home. The question is, are the shootings connected?
Yet, Blade refused to be silenced. He rolled back onto the scene in a wheelchair, dropping defiant tracks that challenged his attackers until the final brutal confrontation. Let's get into it. Born on March 14, 1977 in Detroit, Darnell Quincy Lindsay, better known as Blade Icewood, emerged as a street figure in the city's underground rap scene. Fans called him the Great Lakes Ruler, a title that reflected his authenticity and street credibility. His life and music were deeply shaped by Detroit's complex culture of hustle and survival, making him both a product and a voice of the streets he called home. Blade's background wasn't entirely self-made. It was connected to powerful street figures. His father, Wonderful Wayne, co-founded the infamous Young Boys Incorporated YBI, a major drug organization that fueled much of Detroit's violence during the 80s and 90s. From him, Blade learned the rules of the streets and the business of drug dealing. By the time he came of age, he was running his own operation, reportedly managing a drug ring that generated over $40 million. This early immersion in the underground economy gave Blade the street credibility and tactical knowledge that would later define both his reputation and his music career. Though his earliest years were spent near the east side of Detroit, Blade later moved to the suburb of Southfield during his teens, attending Southfield High School. The energy that defined his hustle remained anchored in the west side, specifically the 7 Mile Road and Evergreen area. In this environment, hustling was often viewed as a requirement for survival and success. By the late 90s, Blade formalized his position by establishing the Street Lords. This was a collective that functioned as both a rap group and a street organization, focused on building an empire. Blade, standing 6 feet 4 inches with an ice-cold demeanor, commanded immediate respect. His rap flow, slow, methodical, deliberate, and menacing, was unique to Motown. His swagger was pure Detroit.
Boy,
that bent with the rims of tint. Wood grain steering wheel, the master seats in the Benz.
The Street Lords, including members like Cash Out Calhoun, G-Rock, and Street Lord Juan, confirmed their status in 1998 with their debut album, Platinum Rollies Don't Tick-Tock. Their single, Come Roll, brought them national attention. Their music was instrumental in shaping Detroit's early trap sound and street-oriented rap style. Through their albums, including Platinum Masterpiece, they provided a foundational blueprint for how future generations of Detroit artists could successfully blend street life with music. They established a new cultural identity built on grit and street pride. This success and dominance were inextricably linked to their reputation and their claim to the name Cheddar Boys. This proprietary dispute over a name, a struggle for the cultural and commercial rights to represent street wealth, drove the lethal conflict that would consume Blade Icewood and others. Blade Icewood's final years were defined by a dispute over the Cheddar Boys name.
I'm the original Cheddar Boy.
Original Cheddar Boy and Chief Cheddar.
Yeah.
Blade, leading the West Side Street Lords, maintained that his group was the original Cheddar Boys. On the other side was the East Side Cheddar Boys, led by Antonio Wipeout Cadell Jr. In Detroit's hip-hop scene, a name carried weight. It was tied to credibility, recognition, and commercial opportunity. This was more than a musical disagreement. It was a dispute with real stakes. The East Side Cheddar Boys were a strong presence in the city. Their track, I'm a Cheddar Boy, received heavy rotation on urban radio, and their debut album sold over 60,000 units within 5 months. The commercial success of ECB added tension to the rivalry. Territory, reputation, and influence were at play, creating what was known in Detroit as a serious East Side-West Side rivalry. According to reports, the disagreement escalated to the point where people were dropped, getting killed, getting shot.
And you know, that's when they came with the Cheddar Boy, Street Lord, and whatnot, and then all that beef shit came, and then that's what broke them apart or whatever, so.
Blade himself contributed to raising the tension. In an interview included on a bonus DVD, he spoke directly to the camera, addressing his rivals. His final statement was a direct challenge, and whoever don't like it, come holler at me. The East Side Cheddar Boys responded with a diss track titled Boss Up and Take They Money. Music became the arena for the conflict, but the rivalry was quickly moving beyond recordings and radio. In the fall of 2004, the feud turned fatal. Antonio Wipeout Cadell Jr., the leader of the East Side Cheddar Boys, was killed.
He died September 18, 2004, and Blade died maybe like I want to say March 2005.
The circumstances of his death, whether directly linked to the name dispute or the broader rivalry, intensified the situation. What began as a disagreement over a group name escalated into a cycle of violence. Street rumors suggested that the conflict should never have reached this level, particularly because Blade and Wipeout were allegedly damn near family. Blade acknowledged this connection in interviews. He referred to Wipeout as my man and damn near family, but he also recognized the limits imposed by the street environment, concluding simply, it is what it is. Despite any personal ties or previous friendship, the rules of street credibility and rivalry took precedence. After Wipeout's death, the streets of Detroit were tense, anticipating retaliation. Blade Icewood became a marked figure, and the balance between music, reputation, and street loyalty shifted in ways that left little room for negotiation. The feud over a name, once a question of identity and legitimacy in hip-hop, had become a matter of life and death. After Wipeout's death, Detroit was on edge. The tension moved from talk to action almost immediately. A bystander, 36-year-old Anthony Robertson, was also hit and died hours later in the hospital. Wipeout died instantly from multiple gunshot wounds.
Here's what we know. Blade Icewood was in a fight with a member of another Detroit rap group, East Side Cheddar Boys. Sunday morning, one of its members, Antonio Cadell, was shot to death along with an innocent bystander outside a club on Woodward.
The city quickly linked the shooting to the ongoing conflict with Blade Icewood's West Side Street Lords. Local media speculated the attack was tied to the struggle over the Cheddar Boys name. Street rumors suggested a recent robbery at the candy bar might have contributed. Wipeout reportedly refused to force two acquaintances to return an expensive chain. Whatever the exact motive, the result was the same. A key figure in Detroit rap was dead, and the feud had entered a more dangerous phase. Retaliation came fast. 2 days later, on September 20th, 2004, Blade Icewood was the target of a home invasion. Blade had moved to Oak Park, a suburb of Detroit, seeking some distance from the East Side conflict. But the violence followed him. Two armed men broke into his home, firing an AK-47 assault rifle. Blade was hit 7 times. Investigators described the attack as deliberate and targeted. The shooting left Blade paralyzed from the chest down. He survived, but his life changed entirely. Confined to a wheelchair, he faced not just physical recovery, but the constant reminder that the streets of Detroit had claimed another chapter in the rivalry. The community was shaken. Testimony later revealed that one man connected to Blade's eventual killing, Larry Davidson, had been heard in a barbershop saying, he was going to get Blade. Even after the attack, Blade followed the street code strictly. He refused to cooperate with the Oak Park police or provide information on his assailants. Sergeant Mike Pinkerton confirmed that Blade would not assist investigators. Because of his silence, those responsible for paralyzing him were never legally held accountable.
Oak Park Police Sergeant Mike Pinkerton said Wednesday that no one was ever arrested for that shooting and said Icewood had refused to help investigators.
The attack sent a clear message. Retaliation was expected, and the feud was far from over. For Blade Icewood, the violence marked a turning point. The rivalry over a name had escalated into life-altering consequences. Streets were tense. The rap community watched closely, and Blade's survival did not end the cycle of violence. After weeks in the hospital, Blade Icewood returned home, confined to a wheelchair. The assassination attempt had left him paralyzed from the chest down, but it had not diminished his presence in Detroit. His refusal to cooperate with law enforcement solidified his reputation. Blade Icewood had chosen the street code, and in doing so, he became untouchable in a way the police could not reach. Despite his condition, Blade refused to disappear. He returned to the music scene almost immediately, using his platform to respond to the attack and assert his dominance. Within months, he released Ride on Me, a track that became an instant anthem in Detroit. It was not a song of despair or retreat. It was a declaration. Blade used his words to strike back, turning trauma into music and defiance into art. The lyrics were clear. Blade addressed his attackers directly, rubbing the failure of their attempt in their faces. He made no effort to soften the message. In his own words, 7 times with a K, and still here to see another day. Damn you lucky Blade. He made survival itself part of the narrative, elevating himself to the mythic status of rap legends who had survived their own brushes with death. Unlike many, he acknowledged responsibility for his circumstances, rapping about the attack as a consequence of his actions and choices within the world of hip-hop. Ride on Me functioned as more than just music. It was a signal, a statement to friends and enemies alike that Blade Icewood remained in control. His voice carried authority, anger, and clarity. The track was a testament to resilience, showing the streets that paralysis had not ended him. In fact, it seemed to make him more formidable. From a wheelchair, he continued the feud, and the rivalry that had nearly cost him his life only intensified. The cycle of retaliation, however, was never far from the surface. Blade's public defiance, combined with the street rumors that swirled in the aftermath of the shootings, kept tension alive. Whispers of personal betrayals, shifting loyalties, and intimate relationships added another layer to the conflict. Even as he asserted his musical authority, the streets of Detroit remained on edge. Violence and retaliation had become intertwined with his art, and his lyrics acted as both warning and proclamation. Blade's defiance carried a bitter irony. Just months before the AK-47 attack, he had headlined a Stop the Violence rally in Detroit, urging the community to seek non-violent solutions to the struggles of the streets. Yet, he had become emblematic of the very cycle he had condemned. His music reflected this tension simultaneously as a call for respect, a chronicle of survival, and a reminder of the consequences of street conflicts. The reach of Blade Icewood's response extended beyond Detroit. Ride on Me appeared alongside the East Side Cheetah Boys track Oh Boy in the 2005 John Singleton-directed film Four Brothers, placing the rivalry into a broader cultural context. His story, his music, and his defiance became part of the urban narrative, immortalized not just in the city streets, but on screen. Even in the face of paralysis, Blade Icewood remained a symbol of defiance. His art became both catharsis and communication, telling the world he would not yield, that the feud was far from over, and that survival could be as powerful a statement as retaliation. In the aftermath of the shooting, Blade transformed trauma into legacy, showing that the street's code could persist even when the body could no longer move freely. Ride on Me was more than a song. It was Blade's declaration that he remained alive, vocal, and undefeated in the world that had tried to take him. The cycle of violence that had begun with Blade Icewood's shooting in September 2004 reached its deadly conclusion 7 months later. On April 19th, 2005, Blade was targeted once again, this time in a way that left no chance for survival. He was seated in the passenger seat of his Range Rover near a car wash on West 7 Mile Road in Detroit. His wheelchair, the symbol of his defiance and resilience, now confined him, making him immobile and vulnerable. The location was significant. It was the West Side, the foundation of his street presence and reputation. A gunman approached the vehicle. Witnesses offered slightly different accounts. Some said the shooter immediately opened fire, while others suggested a brief, heated exchange occurred beforehand. Either way, the outcome was certain. Blade Icewood was struck by a total of 17 rounds. The execution-style attack was precise and deliberate, aimed specifically at the passenger side. This was not a random act. It was a calculated assassination designed to end the life of a high-profile figure who had survived the street's most extreme tests.
Rap performer Blade Icewood has been killed in a drive-by shooting 7 months after another gun attack left him paralyzed from the chest down.
Blade's death was final. After surviving 7 gunshot wounds less than a year earlier, his life ended in an instant, turning the defiance he had displayed into a tragic conclusion. The man who had once stared down the threat of death, channeling survival into music and reputation, was silenced. For the streets of Detroit, the message was clear. Retaliation was complete, and the feud had run its course. The public response was immediate. Blade Icewood, known as the Great Lakes Ruler, had died less than a mile from the site of a rally he had hosted months earlier, advocating for peace and discouraging violence in the city.
The shooting was within a mile of the site where Icewood hosted a non-violence rally last year.
The irony was stark. Even as he called for non-violence, his life had been dominated by cycles of revenge, and the code he had followed ultimately dictated his fate. Investigators quickly turned to potential suspects. One name stood out: Larry Davidson, also known as Lil Larry. Davidson had a reputation in the Detroit street community as a hitman for hire, and the evidence linking him to Blade's murder was strong. Witnesses described the shooter as stocky, with a lighter complexion, wearing light-colored sweatpants or tackies. The manner of the attack execution style, with a clear line of sight, pointed to someone experienced and intent on completing a vendetta. Sergeant Mike Pinkerton of the Oak Park Police reflected on the significance of the killing. It seems kind of obvious that somebody had some sort of vendetta, he said. Looks like somebody finished what they started. The act was precise, professional, and designed to send a message. Blade Icewood's survival and defiance no longer mattered. The feud had reached its final act. The murder closed the chapter on one of Detroit's most significant street conflicts. Blade Icewood's story, marked by talent, ambition, and a strict adherence to the street code, ended in tragedy, but it left an enduring mark on Detroit's music and street culture. His life and death illustrated the cost of living within a world where reputation and retaliation are inseparable. The investigation into Blade Icewood's murder eventually led authorities to Larry Davidson, known on the streets as Lil Larry. Davidson had been heard threatening to get Blade, and the evidence confirmed his direct role in the fatal shooting. He was charged and ultimately convicted for the felony murder of Darnell Lindsay, a case that tied him to the violent chain of events that had consumed Detroit's rap scene. The trial also looked at the earlier home invasion that had left Blade paralyzed. Dre Carter, an accomplice in that attack, was implicated as well, showing how the incidents were connected. The investigation made clear that Blade's shooting wasn't random, it was planned, a chain of retaliation and calculated moves that ended in his death. Even after Davidson's conviction, the deeper truth of who orchestrated the attacks remains hidden. Locked behind the unwritten code of the streets, Davidson refused to cooperate with authorities, keeping the identity of the person who ordered the hit a secret. This silence is part of the culture Blade had followed his whole life. Loyalty and respect meant more than answers, even if it cost lives. Blade Icewood's story is a stark reminder of what it meant to live by that code. He survived 7 bullets in 2004, refused to snitch, and turned his trauma into music. But the same rules that made him respected also made him vulnerable. The rivalry with the Eastside Cheetah Boys, as intense as any of the famous feuds in hip-hop history, showed how quickly pride and reputation could escalate. Yet through it all, Blade remained authentic to himself, defiant, fearless, and unwilling to compromise. Evidence tied Davidson directly to the murder weapon. A local barbershop owner testified that, weeks before Blade's death, Davidson bragged about the AK-47 shooting, saying he had put Blade in a wheelchair and that he was going to get Blade. Police later tracked Davidson to Texas, where he was hiding with a fake ID. Forensic evidence confirmed the .45 caliber handgun recovered there matched the casings from Blade's Range Rover, sealing his fate. In May 2006, Davidson was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Dre Carter, involved in the earlier attack, also received a life sentence. Yet even with justice served, questions remained. Who had paid for the hit? Rumors suggested $10,000 exchanged hands, but the truth may never be known. Davidson stayed silent, honoring the same code that had defined Blade's life. In the world they lived in, loyalty and silence were as binding as any law. Despite the violence and loss, Blade Icewood's legacy endures. He helped define Detroit's street rap aesthetic. Tracks like Boy Would You popularized the Blade dance, which spread beyond the city and was even adopted by NFL players. His family continues to carry his vision forward through Icewood Entertainment, now run by his son, Lil Blade. The label keeps the music alive, a living connection to a father who refused to back down, even when survival demanded it.